Episode number 88 of Making the Case. Women being the most of the whole story. Please, let's get it. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Making the Case, episode number 88, man. Hey, once again, glad you're here with us. From another great episode, I have to say, and I know I always say this is definitely one of my favorite topics because I don't believe that people really break it down like I'm going to break it down for you today. And I'm really only going to touch the surface. So for today's episode, what we're talking about is women in education. Okay. But before we get into it, of course, my name is Dr. Jacob Bison. I am your host, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, content creator, consultant, father, a little bit of everything. All right. We have two channel norms over here for those of you just joining us for the first time. One, we'll take points in our people, and then two, we don't do all the cussing and derogatory stuff because we like to keep it professional over here. All right. So today, well, let me reframe it. Today we're talking about women being the most educated, and we have to tell the whole story. Okay. Now, the reason why I want to do this topic is because, I'm because of being a content creator, also being an entrepreneur, and also being at the fact that my consulting business is on not just education, but also relationships. Um, I stay in social media streets because that is what my job warrants. Okay. So when it comes to whether it comes to dating, which we're gonna touch on, or when it comes to just education in general, we hear a lot on social media, on YouTube, probably in conversation that women are the most educated. Now, while the stats are showing that that's true, um, a lot of times people like to throw that out as a blanket statement when it comes to yes, they're the most enrolled, but as it relates to things that are keeping our country and our culture systemically up to task with other nations, when it comes to the military, when it comes to the police force and things of that nature, which we've touched on this in the previous video, we know that that is male dominated. All right. Even when we look at the stats when it comes to um, women out earning men, that is not true. I've already showed those stats in the previous video. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go back and check out my previous videos. All right. So I won't be doing that in this episode. But I will be here shortly showing you some other stats as it relate to women in education, right? So a lot of time, and of course, unfortunately, there are a segment of women who like to throw out that they're the most educated and they're now making more than men, and all these solopreneurs who are out there having their own lash business and things like that. I'm not trying to knock anybody hustle, but we also got to be honest, because if you're gonna brag, you got to be truthful and honest about what you're bragging about. All right. And we know that women being educated and women making money is affecting women dating life. We're gonna get into that, of course, in one of my pieces of evidence. But before we get there, we got some other things that we want to touch on. Okay, so yes, while it may be true that women are outpacing men when it comes to college degrees, it's like 60 some percent of women that 60 to 70 of women being out pacing men in college. Um, while that may be true, a lot of times what you see is men, they more go on for certifications, and they go on the, of course, the technical skill route, plumbing, electrician, and things of that nature that only maybe take 2 years, or even training on the job. Well, they can literally be putting in 80 to $100,000 a year because of the amount of work that's being done and the type of work that's being done. See, that often doesn't enter the conversation when women are saying that they got more education. All right. Now, you may have more technical education when it comes to a 2 to 4 year college, right? But what also need to be said is the fact that just because you're going to get trained in a certain field, regardless of what that field is, because we got, let me also say this. We got to understand there's a difference between being trained and being educated. All right. Now, I myself, I like to, well, one, I went to school for history because that is what I teach, right? So history is a huge part of what I do. I'm also invested in the sciences. I'm also invested in law and a lot of other different things. Now, that's being an educated person. I myself also have my PhD, right? So I'm not saying this to brag and boast. What I'm saying is just because I have the degree doesn't mean anything, right? I get trained to have degrees in certain areas so that I'm able to do a certain job. That is a lot of time what women are bragging about. But being educated is a whole different ball game, right? There's a lot of men out there that don't have the 4 year degrees and master degrees and PhD degrees, but have a lot of knowledge and information. They're educated men, right? I don't want us to gloss over that. Okay, that's an important point to make because, and really, I want to show you my bookshelf over here, but I don't think that's necessary. But like, I pride myself on being well read in many different fields, in many different subjects. All right. Just because I'm interested. I'm a lifelong learner, right? I'm not just interested in history, but I'm interested in many other in education. I'm interested in many other subjects, right? That is being an educated person, right? One who is well read, one who is constantly seeking information and knowledge, one who understands uh, the simplicity when it comes to things such as politics, religion, things of that nature, right? That's being an educated person. And you do not need to go to a 4 year institution or even a 2 year institution to be educated, all right? There are people who are self taught when it comes to reading, writing, and things of that nature, right? They educated themselves. Because if you go to an institution, and I've been to 3 of them, right? All they're going to do is put information right in front of you until you read this. We're going to test on this in a week, right? So that is what we're talking about when we're talking about schooling. There's a difference between schooling and education. I just wanted to put that out there, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to get into the fact, we're going to bring some facts, right? Because you know that's what this channel is about. We're about facts. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion, but I'm going to give you the facts first. All right. So I have 3 pieces of evidence. Bear with me because I got a few videos for you, but I want to show you some stats first before we get into the video. So, you know, to set the framework of what we're talking about when we say women are more educated. Okay. So without further ado, let's get into our first piece of evidence. Let's go. All right. So this is my first piece of evidence. I want to just show you some numbers, some stats. I want to read something off to you. And I'm gonna keep this brief so that we can get into what else that we got to touch on. So these are some stats by a platform called Bankrate that deal with numbers, deal with mortgages, investing, credit card. So more of the economic aspect of things. All right. So let me read some things to you, put some things into perspective. Right. It said nearly 80% of graduates with the 20 most lucrative college degrees are men. Now, this was back in 2023, but this also says in 2025, study shows limited progress in closing top earning college majors gender gap. So even though that was from 2023, also a study done in 2025 is saying that there's very little change. So I just want to put that out there for you. All right. Women represent most of the country's college-educated workforce, a milestone that has been decades in the making, and yet their honest earnings still trail those of men. Now, um, that debunks the whole idea of women making more than men because, like I said, even when we look at the median income of women and men, regardless of race, men are out earning women, right? Now, because we understand that just because you go to a have a college degree, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily out earn someone without one. It depends on the job, depending on if you're on your own business. So it's a lot of other factors that go into it. Now, on average, if you have a person who got a college education or only a high school degree, what regardless of race, right? We can say that yes, that person with a college degree will out earn that person with a high school diploma. Nothing wrong with that. But when we look at the stats, well, one, we got to take into account that men work more hours than women, right? So that's going to shrink things. And they typically choose, or in some cases, it's really not a choice. It's things that have to be done in society that women don't want to do, and men have to do it, right? I guarantee you, most men don't want to work on an oil rig, right? Most men don't necessarily want to go risk their lives in combat. Even though I would say that, the salary isn't that great, but there is a lot of great benefits when it comes to the military. But I digress. Let's keep going. One potential explanation is gender difference across high paying and low paying college majors. Nearly 4 in 5, 78% of graduates with the 20 highest paying bachelor degrees are men, while only 1 in 5, 22% are women, according to new bank rate research. Men still dominate undergraduate majors with the highest earnings potential, such as engineering and computer science, while women continue to overrepresent majors that typically lead to lower salaries, such as early childhood education and social work. How do I know this? Because I have a degree in social work and I also have a teaching degree, right? So I get into the field that doesn't make that much, right? Now, due to my advanced degrees, I do pretty well for myself. On top of the fact that I own a business, on top of that, I'm a content creator. So I have to do other things to supplement my income, even though I make more than the average teacher. Let's just put it that way, okay? Because of my advanced degrees. But this goes to show you that once again, and women are not being forced into their career. They're just not getting into the STEM field like men are. They getting into jobs that speaks to their nurturing nature, which makes sense biologically and socially and psychologically, right? They're doing jobs fitting for their nature. Men are going into jobs fitting of their aggressive nature, right? So once again, this goes back to a biological aspect that we're talking about. Let's keep reading. I won't read too much more. I think you kind of get the drift. For this study, Bankrate looked at the most recent data available from the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey in 2021 to analyze the median salaries of American workers based on the subject of their bachelor degrees, as well as the gender differences across more than 150 college majors. Economics and sociologists say the significant gender difference in many college majors, particularly in science, technology, engineering, and math majors, play a role in maintaining the overall gender wage gap. So, are they saying that we men just get paid more than women because they're men? No, is the majors that they're going into in college. My daughter went into nursing, right? A lot of women going into nursing, teaching, right? Communication degrees. These are just facts, and no one is enforcing them. I don't think there is a movement saying women have to do this. No, they're choosing to do this based off their nature. Let's see. Still, a STEM degree does not ensure against the gender wage gap. Even when women study STEM fields and earn similar qualification, pure research shows they are still paid less than their male counterpart once they enter the workforce. But once again, factors are when women have children, men tend to work more. Women tend to focus on family. When a child is sick, a woman typically takes off. Those are factors that go into that, right? This reveals a troubling reality. Despite women educational progress in the male-dominated majors and growing representation in the college-educated workforce, they sadly continue to lag behind men for reasons beyond their control. Well, I wouldn't say beyond their control. I guess if things were more egalitarian, but to be honest with you, women don't want that. Um, but it's nothing they can do about getting pregnant because in order to continue our species, well, we got to have babies. So I guess that's what they mean by beyond their control. Okay, I get it. I apologize. All right. Let's see a quote from Dr. Nicole Smith. We're told in order to be successful, you had to be educated. Then you're going to get a good job. You'll be able to take care of your household. But it feels as if women can't win. Here we go. Because even though we do exactly what we're told, the ending isn't as happy as we envision. Part of the reason is women continue to soar into a particular field, whether it's by choice or by design. And here's coming from you, that's a career woman talking, right? That is a woman that wants to compete with men. There is many women out here that want to compete with men. That's part of the reason why they go get these degrees, right? They want to feel a sense of power in their stroking their ego, right? But at the end of the day, it has nothing. I don't want to say nothing to do. It doesn't matter how much, even if you make the same amount of men, there's still a factor there that you're not going to be able to compete with, which is the fact that men typically are going to outwork women, right? Because we're physically built for it. That's just biology. So that mentality, that's a feminist speaking. I'm just gonna be real with you, right? It's cool if you want to work, if you want to get into any field you want to, cool, do that by all means. But when we try to make it a gender issue, that becomes the problem. All right, let me read something else to you. Key takeaways. Nearly 4 in 5 of graduates with the 20 highest paying bachelor's degrees are men. We kind of already got into that. Of the 20 highest earning majors, the only ones not heavily dominated by men are pharmacy, pharmaceutical science and administration, health, and medical preparatory programs. So women a lot of times go into the medical field, right? But still, more men are doctors. Of the 20 common majors for women, only those with a nursing degree earn a median salary higher than 60,000. The lowest earning major, women's 20 most common major, is early childhood education at 43,000 annually, and that depends on what state you're living in. Early childhood education also has the highest percentage of female degree holders. Absolutely, 80% of people in education are women, white women at that. Okay. I just want to show you that because, for all this talk of women are most educated, women make more than men, blah, 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 that dispels that whole notion. So now we can move on, talking about some more aspect when it comes to just education in general. All right. So let's move on to our second piece of evidence.
Economic success on an individual, regional, and national level. Countries with little to no natural resource wealth, poor geographic positions, and even unstable geopolitical situations can and do outperform countries that have all of these factors working in their favour simply because they have a better educated population. But in economics, there can be too much of a good thing, and in certain countries around the world, education may be going too far and costing too much to ever return positive economic results. On an individual level, there is more to just economic returns to consider, of course. People seek high levels of education because they are interested in subjects, and that's fine. But on a national level, when things like workforce participation, skills mismatches, and student debt are all turning into major economic burdens, it's important to recognise that more isn't necessarily always better. Finding the right balance is going to be hard, especially as new technologies are constantly changing the skill sets that are demanded by the economy, and that's before considering variables like skilled migration, which can add or subtract skills to the labour market very quickly. If economies can prosper or perish based on the skills of their people, then it's something that we're going to have to get right, even if it is really difficult. And to do that, or at least to have the best shot at doing that, we're going to need to answer some important questions. So, are our modern economies becoming overeducated? If they are, what are the consequences of having too much of a good thing? And finally, what can be done to slow down or...
You see, as a teacher of 25 years, working with young people, pre-university students, I just became dissatisfied with the education system because of what I saw it was doing to our people. A whole lot of education mismatch, which is linked to so much unemployment around us. The crime rate goes high. Our young people just drinking, just sitting at home doing nothing. Whereas they are skilled young people. They have talents, they have gifts. They can start something. But the education system is not targeting those skills that they have. And for me, I just understood that it's like leading a continent to nowhere. You know? And when we look around us and we see how people are stuck, I knew deep down that there should be a way. There should be a way to help or to solve this problem. So you see,
Biggest lie young people are told is that when you're 18, 19, 20, 16 and 17 is exam results define your future. I left school at 16 with no qualifications and no money, and hardly anyone believed in me, especially my teachers. My first job was making wooden trash cans for less than $2 an hour. I felt like a failure. In fact, to make things worse, my manager bullied me and gave me all the bad jobs. So I decided to quit and start my own business. It felt like a big risk, but I went for it. 35 years later, I run 2 multi-million-dollar businesses. I've grossed over $70 million and have the house of my dreams. But most importantly, I have the freedom to spend time with my family. I want you to know it doesn't matter where you are right now. Your past doesn't determine your future. All that matters is...
And that she wants is like 50% of the population, maybe.
I feel like they're out there. I feel like it's more than 1%.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Okay.
1%.
How is that
No.
1%
Okay, hold on.
when that's bare
Let's say
minimum?
it's true, right? But hold on. Do you not see what the hell happened there? She went to University of Miami. She has a master's degree.
Yeah.
We're showing her empirical fact. And she said, I feel like
What the hell?
that there's more men out there.
Yeah.
What the hell?
I mean, that's what they all think.
No.
But
Hold
how
on.
is
Hold
that
on.
the 1%? That's what I don't get.
Hold on. This is for the
Like,
audience here. This is a woman that went to a pretty good school, master's degree,
Educated.
has empirical data in front of her that her requirements are only about 1%.
All right, so that was my second piece of evidence. So we're talking about just education overall and um, why women feel the need to brag about being more educated is because, let's be honest, because in our society, we think the more education equates to the more money, which we just talked about how that's not necessarily true in all cases. It depends on a lot of different factors, which we already kind of talked about. And the fact that just because you went to a college doesn't mean you're the brightest, right? My last video actually touched on that because I, from a person who's been in a couple different universities, I would have to say that, you know, we've heard that common sense is not that common anymore. I would have to agree, right? Just because I've met a lot of people who are quote unquote college educated and they're not that bright. Like I said, I always say that people are trained in college, not necessarily educated, right? Because a lot of times they throw a bunch of books at you, they throw a bunch of research articles, a bunch of information your way till you read it. And let's be honest, all college students do not always read it. I'm one of those that did not always read the information that was given to me. So let's be real. All right. So I get most of my educated outside of the university setting, me going to the library, me purchasing my own books, me reading documentaries, so forth and so on. So just because you're college educated does not mean you're smarter or better than someone. Okay. As the first couple of videos kind of touched on, and me being an educator and a person that has been working with children, adults, and teenagers for over 20 plus years, I know it doesn't look it. But I can tell you that being around college educated people, no, these are some of the most kind of lack of critical thinking. They lack social awareness. It's a lot of things that people are lacking because they're trained to do a certain job, right? Doesn't mean you're educated. And as the first video touched on, the fact that, well, education, us putting so much into education, well, it's affecting our economics because a lot of people are in college debt, right? So these women that's doing all these bragging on education, what they got to understand is they also got a lot of debt too that the men who choose to not go into college don't have. All right. So and a lot of them going to be paying on it for 20, 30 years, just like they'll be paying on a mortgage. All right. So they're paying on student loans, they're paying a mortgage, they're paying cars. Right. Once again, it goes back to we like to pretend like we live in a certain lifestyle. We like to travel and take pictures. Oh, girl, I'm over here. Right. Well, you thousands of dollars in debt. We just got to keep it real. All right. So it's no different for us going and buying all these knockoff designers while we really live in a Kroger and Walmart lifestyle. We just got to be real about it. Okay. I ain't trying to shame them. I'm saying we got to be honest. We got to be more honest with ourselves. All right. So that's my second piece of evidence. What we're going to do is we're going to go and talk my third piece of evidence, which is going to talk about women being educated and dating, which I'm pretty sure you're really going to be interested in. All right. Let's get into our third piece of evidence.
The other place where you get this sort of mating is where you get women who are super educated.
That makes sense.
The exact same thing happens.
Sure.
The more educated a woman gets, the worse her marriage prospects, because the more sophisticated women are, the more they insist on a high status male. And therefore, as I get more educated as a woman, there are just fewer men who are as educated or more than me. And therefore, I'm doomed to a life of solitude.
That totally makes sense. That totally makes sense, especially considering that men, in general, they get insecure around women who are more successful,
yes,
and more educated or more intelligent. Like, very rarely are men comfortable with a woman who has to explain things to them.
Absolutely. And the other place where
women are graduating at double the rates of college as men, it has huge societal impacts because women made socioeconomically horizontally and up, men horizontally and down. In some, women with college degrees typically aren't interested in men without college degrees. So we're seeing less household formation, lower birth rates, and these things usually stunt an economy. Women are graduating at double the rates of college as men. It has huge.
Statistically speaking, the more money a woman makes and the higher she goes in education, the least likely she is to marry. That is statistically, that's true. Why? Because it's harder for her to.
I feel so bad for women when it comes to this. Essentially, the more education you have as a woman, the more financially or socioeconomically, higher you are in the rankings, the harder it is for you to date.
To find somebody that will match you.
Like, women will often date or marry to raise their socioeconomic status, to do better, which that's smart. I would too if I was a woman. Whereas men, honest to God,
we don't
men
care,
we will fall in love with a homeless woman, bro.
Yeah, we're dogs.
Yeah, not dogs. I don't know if it makes you a dog. Being essentially, I think men are just have lower standards. I feel.
All right, so that was my third piece of evidence where we focus on women with education and dating and how it pretty much lower their rate of getting married, lower their rate of being in a long-term successful relationship. It lower things when it comes to finding a mate and dating. And I believe we've talked about this before, and you probably have already heard that the reason why is because most women are hypergamous, right? So most women are going to be looking for a man on their social economic level. And in women's minds, education equates to that. We know that there's a lot of people out there that don't have degrees and dropped out of high school but have a lot of money. Now, they typically don't want those type of men, not because they feel like they're uneducated, but because they feel like that there's a certain level of sophistication that is not there. So women who typically have your master's degrees and your PhDs and maybe in some case bachelor degrees, they're going to be trying to look for equivalent or higher, right? Which is the reason why those type of men with those degrees are sought after. Okay. Now men on the other hand, like me, the fact that I could care less if you have a degree. Now, I do want you to have a certain level of intelligence, and a lot of time women equate intelligence with degrees, which I've kind of already said that's not necessarily the case. Just because you're in college doesn't mean you're intelligent. Just because you got money don't mean you're intelligent, right? I believe we know this, or it should be common sense, right? But the reason why women struggle a lot in dating and when it comes to find a mate and getting married is because they are hypergamous. They do want men that have a certain level of education and a certain amount of money, right? And so they do believe that certain men are beneath them or don't level up to them. And they have these type in not only do they well, the reason why they have these type of feelings is because they've been told this, right? Feminism have trained them, their mothers have trained them, girl, don't depend on a man, go to school. Right? So they literally been brought up right like this, and you wonder why modern women are the way that they are. But what you're seeing now is you're seeing the class. You're seeing the men who want feminine, submissive women and modern women who just are not that part. So that plays a factor into why they marrying less, why they having a problem dating, because they want that cake and they want to eat it too. They believe they could be a modern woman, get out here, do whatever they want to, travel when they want to, while at the same time have a man who's a leader, who's alpha, who's this and that, and they don't match up. All right. Masculine men want feminine women. Period. Okay. I don't know how many times that men have to say this on and off camera, right? But that's just is what it is. I just had to tell somebody this, a few days ago. Okay. Because there are a lot of women out here that believe that they are feminine when they're trying to operate in a masculine frame. All right. So, I mean, it kind of is what it is. And I would never tell a woman, don't pursue a career, don't pursue education, things of that nature. Right. But what I would say that make sure that your femininity is not snatched from you. Make sure that you're being trained and somebody is mentoring you on how to be a feminine woman. Okay. Because I do believe you can be both. I believe you can be a feminine woman while also maintain a career and a job and go out there and do something that you really love and you're really passionate about. But I will also say this, don't shame the women who choose just to be staying at home moms and raise their families. Because at the end of the day, as a woman, what you're doing is if you think that your career comes first, you're sacrificing and you're totally out of order because that's not feminine. You could be a woman that is naturally wants to have kids and raise kids and be about her husband while at the same time taking on something that may be part-time or taking on a passion of yours, whether it's charity work or something like that. You could still do that. But for a woman, as a feminine woman, your career shouldn't be your number one. That man's purpose is his number one. But we're so out of line and out of sorts that the proof is in the pudding. Right? So you just got to be careful out here, ladies. And, I feel like that, relationship and family is the priority. And then if you happen to have a career or a job that you're passionate about it, kudos to you. But for a woman, relationship and family is a priority. For a man, being a leader, being on your purpose, and taking care of that family is your priority. You see how that will align? Okay. All right, man, we're going to wrap up today's episode. Hopefully you got something from this. Hopefully I gave you the facts, the data, statistics, and I gave you a perspective that makes sense. Okay. Whether yay or nay, please comment. Let me know what you think about today's episode. Of course, all my websites and my social media handles be in the description. Follow your boy. Holla at your boy. Get the books. If you would like a consultation, of course, rcdconsultancy.com is where you can find me, whether that's couple or one-on-one. All right. So, as always, I'm you and me, love, always love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. And I think we just made that case, baby. All right. Deuces. One love.